Wigan's got a picture, good. Excellent, Wigan, well done. With Edmonton, candidate for Edmonton.
On these streets in London, Mayor Boris Johnson is treated like a star because he is. Today, we're following him through the streets of Uxbridge in outer London, the electorate he's hoping and expects to win in the upcoming national election.
You look lovely in person.
What do you like about him?
We just know that he's a very good person, very good politician, and I'm very happy to meet him here and to have a photo with him.
What policy do you like the most about him?
Actually, I have not deep knowledge about policy.
Just you like his personality?
Yes.
Well, this is Boris in the street, the entertainer. You can see he pulls a crowd. People want selfies with him. He's enormously popular because he entertains. But what about the essence of the man? What is Boris really like? What's he at his core, and what's the political philosophy that drives him? Well, if you ask many people here, they don't really have that broader sense of him, just that they really like him. They like his positivity. They like the way he interacts with the crowd. They just like Boris. I don't want to get left out of this.
There we go. Right, smile. Australia won the match quite easily this morning. You all must be happy.
ABC Australia. Would you believe it?
Everyone I've talked to says one day, at least you're going to have a crack at Prime Minister.
Yeah.
Well, that's the question.
Do
you want to be Prime Minister of Great Britain?
What I want to do is I want to get elected in Uxbridge on May the 7th as part of a winning Conservative team that is led by David Cameron, who amply fills the job of Prime Minister.
That's now, but it's some stage in the future. Some stage in the future.
Well, I think I will be a pretty decrepit old man by the time David Cameron relinquishes the reins of office, and there will be all sorts of young thrusters. Perhaps some of them getting their selfies with us today will be putting their names forward.
Today he's visiting the second most marginal electorate in the country, the seat of Hendon in outer London. The Conservative incumbent is hoping the Boris Stardust will help him hang on to his seat.
But without further ado, I'm going to introduce the Conservative Mayor of London, Boris Johnson.
Thank you very much, everybody. Good morning, everybody. Right, we now have, after 5 years of Conservative government, the fastest growing economy in Europe. Our city is the uncontested financial, commercial, cultural, artistic, scientific, sporting and innovation capital of Europe.
Boris Johnson says a vote for the anti-immigration party UKIP or a return to Labour under leader Ed Miliband would be a backward step.
And I'd much rather, by the way, they had the problems of today. I remember what it was like in the 1970s, so you all look too young and thrusting to remember the 1970s. I was there. I remember London was a much bleaker and more miserable place, and we had a union-dominated economy. We had something called the brain drain, do you remember? And we had hundreds of thousands of people leaving this country. We had such a hopeless economic situation. The population of London actually fell by 2 million.
Behind the Boris banter is a serious underlying philosophy. Greed may not be good, but making money, well, go for it.
And my advice to you is vote Tory and get broadband. Vote UKIP and get Miliband. That's the risk. And I think people look at what we're trying to do and they understand that we are supporting wealth creation, unashamedly, but wealth creation with the moral purpose. With the moral purpose that it's only if you have a strong and vibrant and dynamic economy that you can pay for the poorest and the neediest and meet the civilized objectives that any society must. And that's how we've won in London. That's how we're going to win again in London. And that is how we're going to win in a few weeks' time.
It's London where Boris has made his mark. 8 million and growing. 300 languages and cultures. 40% of those born outside the UK. According to the Mayor, it's a formula that can be successfully replicated across the country.
I think that in London we've been very lucky because things are really going well. The economy's going gangbusters. But I think people have got to understand that that is because that we have a culture now in London of real enterprise, and the startups are extraordinary. There's a confidence, there's an entrepreneurial spirit now that I think is at the heart of the economy.
He's pushing the idea of capitalism with a moral purpose. Prosperity to pay for schools and hospitals, and a living wage of £7.85 an hour nationally.
Now, you ask what are the guts of my political beliefs. It's about backing wealth creation, backing energy and enterprise as the only way of getting to pay for the poorest and the neediest. And so I'm not a socialist, I'm not a left-winger, because the emphasis there is treating the private sector as something you milk, something you loot, something you raid.
Boris Johnson sells himself as an action man on housing, employment and transport, the trains, buses, and especially his beloved bikes. Perhaps what he's known best for is what I'm riding here. It's one of the bikes in the bike hire scheme, sponsored at vast expense, millions of pounds, by Barclays Bank. But do you think they're known as Barclay bikes? No way. These are known universally as Boris bikes. The Boris brand rules in this town. It cannot rule further afield. While London's chief cyclist harvests huge credit for the scheme, what else of substance is he peddling to the voters? Well, you're a great fan of Churchill, of course, written a book recently about it. In one of those passages you described, or I think it was describing somebody else's description of him as all sizzle, not much sausage. Could that accusation be levelled at you?
No, I think the sausage factor is almost overwhelming. If I may say so, the sizzle. If you look at the ratio of sausage to sizzle in London in the last few years, there is no other place. They have seen near Victorian levels of investment in their transport. They're seeing the huge expansion in sectors of the economy that didn't exist before. The sausage is. We have got so much sausage that Jeremy Clarkson himself will be weeping with joy. Sausage production will be very.
On the national stage, Boris's greatest challenge will be immigration, with almost all parties promising to cut the intake. Last year, net arrivals increased to just under 300,000, the majority from EU nations where free movement is guaranteed by law. It's a key election issue dominating the debate. Boris Johnson has his own solutions in mind.
What I campaigned for in the past is a free travel zone between Britain and Australia, so that you have the same sorts of arrangements and just a recognition of, we're so timid in this country. We wouldn't say boo to a goose. We don't want to frighten anybody. We don't want to offend the European Union. We don't want to offend anybody. We got a historic relationship with Australia. Now, as it happens, I I think probably this is not the moment to offer any kind of change in any immigration policy at all. The whole subject's become so kind of toxic and neuralgic. You probably want to quietly park it for the time being. But that's my feeling, and I think there are many Australians in London who would agree with me. Whether they would be actually delirious with joy in Australia about the idea of loads more POMs coming out to Australia, I don't know. So you need to work on that.
While his beloved London is regarded by most as a multicultural success story, in the stagnant rural and coastal areas, new arrivals are not always as welcome, creating deep fractures in society. It's seaside towns like Margate that are offering the anti-immigration parties their most passionate support. The once glorious holiday resorts are now beset by high unemployment and low economic activity. Indeed, it's no surprise the head of the UK Independence Party, Nigel Farage, is running in Margate. Supporters see him as a saviour. Britain's protector from the European Union regulations and its unregulated hordes. He's here at the UKIP Spring Conference to rally the troops.
Only by divorcing ourselves from the EU and by taking back control of our borders can we give the British people what overwhelmingly they would want and support, and we will campaign for this country to have an Australian point-style system to decide who should come and settle in our country.
UKIP wants out of the EU and an end to the free flow of EU nationals, especially the Eastern Europeans. Anti-UKIP protesters have come to the UKIP conference too, with their take on the upstart party.
Thank you very much indeed.
But former immigration officer and UKIP candidate Maxine Spencer dismisses accusations she belongs to a party of racists.
I mean, I'm an immigrant in terms of my mother's from Trinidad, my father's Welsh. I was born in London but left here as a little child and grew up in Trinidad. So I'm sort of 50-50. So of course, people say about racism, I said that's a load of rubbish. I know about racism. I sort of went through it as a child. I was born in the 60s in London. And there were certain schools I couldn't go in because I was like a black kid.
She also wants Britain to adopt Australia's immigration system.
Immigration is a big issue for us, but also I think it's the racist system they've got now. If you're a non-EU national, you're subject to immigration control, and if you're from the EU, you're not. It should be the same for everyone. For me, that's a much fairer system. And I do admire Australia with a points-based system. It's really good because, it's got a good system where it's controlled. It's just here, it's not controlled enough.
Another UKIP candidate is 67-year-old Peter Allen, a former plumber and a Conservative voter until now, and thrilled to hear his leader speak.
Oh God, it was so, well not just him, but the whole day was so inspirational and instructional, that's the thing. It's a very successful meeting, and yeah, I look to next year, actually. I want to see him next year. I want to be up on the stage next year.
But in the streets of Margate, a short walk from the UKIP conference, immigrants are breathing life into what were empty shop fronts. Stores like this former video shop were boarded up. Now they house delicatessens, selling Eastern European and other goods, providing employment and industry.
I know that doesn't like East European people, but we are not going to move from here. I'm living here already for 11 years. Some of my customers are living here for 10 years. Many people have here mortgages. What are we going to do with that? It's not fair.
Casimira Derin came from Poland looking for a better life. She says many immigrants have children in the local schools and mortgages.
If, for example, now we are going back to our countries, how are we going to work in here? We're helping regenerate it here, Margate and Cliftonville, especially the Cliftonville, because it's an amazing place here. And I hope so nobody will be going to send us back to our countries.
It's hot dog.
Just hot dog, yeah, that's $3.50.
Thank you.
UKIP is unlikely to win more than half a dozen seats in the House of Commons, but the Conservatives are neck and neck with Ed Miliband's Labour Party. Boris Johnson is well aware that if too many voters desert his party for UKIP, that will allow Labour to win more seats. For Boris Johnson, the best defence against UKIP is to simply pretend it doesn't exist.
I think the trick with UKIP is, as with all your people who try to imitate you, just ignore them. You remember John Travolta and Nicolas Cage in Face Off. Do you remember? You see that film where I think one of them, Nick Cage freaks out because John Travolta steals his identity. Don't freak out. We're the Conservative Party. We're the only party that's going to offer a referendum on Europe. We're the only party that can conceivably form a government.
And forget about Nigel Farage.
Why give them, these other people, don't give them the oxygen. Don't give them the oxygen. Don't freak out.
As head of the UK Independence Party, Nigel Farage not only enjoys upsetting the political status quo, he's actually made a career out of it, cultivating the image of the political outsider, mad as hell and not taking it anymore. It's always a bit of a scrum wherever Nigel Farage turns up. You can see the media throng around him now. People call him a xenophobe, a racist. He says he represents what Britons really want. The reality is he is attracting enough votes to worry the major parties, and that's why they are taking him seriously. Nigel, one for Australia. One for Australia, Nigel.
Yeah. Hello, how you doing?
What do you like
Well done in the cricket.
What do you like about the Australian
Well done in the cricket. Well done with the point system. Well done with making your own law. Well done with being a self-confident nation. Congratulations. And what do I like about it? You can choose. You can choose. You can choose how many people come to your country, and you set some very, very stiff markers in terms of qualifications, in terms of bringing health insurance and all of those things. That's exactly what we want for this country.
Boris Johnson says the best way to deal with you and your party is ignore you both.
He can try if he wants to, but there's a lot of people out there who aren't ignoring us and who intend to vote for us.
Thank you. Let's go. Look at that. Morning, Carl. Morning, the cod throat.
Back in London, it's a meeting of the very big fish, although one is witness to the other's final indignity.
I want you to do that. You don't use that.
The not-so-shy mayor even stops to do international media interviews dressed as a fishmonger.
I'd love to have them. I think they're...
Right, Bloomberg.
My grandmother used to wear something like this sometimes. I have to wear this to protect the fish from anything that mites or so forth might crawl out of my head.
Boris Johnson's fish factory foray is aimed at encouraging apprenticeships and perhaps his own election chances. But he also has a message for London's apprentices learning the deadly arts of violent jihad.
All these kids, most of them are they petty criminals, lots of them, people whose lives could be turned around at various stages in the chain. It's tragic in some ways that they haven't been. It doesn't mean I blame society, so to speak. I blame the parents. I'm afraid I blame I blame people who the individuals themselves who must take responsibility and must be held accountable for what they've done. But yes, if you can get people into work, then that will make a huge difference.
And it's a major concern for the mayor that many young jihadis, both men and women, come from his London.
Many of them will be the types of young people who will get involved in crime and gang stuff of all kinds. Okay, so we need to demystify this. This isn't some spooky, semi-sacred thing going on here. These are guys who could become all types of criminals. They need a very tough law and order solution. You need a lot of police work on this. You need to crack down on them very hard, but you also need to make sure that they get employment, they get jobs, and London is a great producer of employment. I want to see these kids feeling motivated, feeling included, feeling that society has something for them. And what would be great would be for us all to work very hard. So the Muslim community, everybody working together to say, this is nothing to do with Islam. Islam totally rejects this whole jihadi nonsense. It's a mania. It's an ideological perversion. Scrap it.
We're here in the idyllic village of Charing. It's about 40 minutes by train from London. It's the Conservative stronghold that Peter Allen wants to win for the UKIP party, both in the national and local elections. The former plumber has just returned from the UKIP conference in Margate, excited to be campaigning for his party.
What is it you like about them most?
I think basically the immigration part about it.
Yeah.
And I think it will make a change to have somebody indifferent rather than the big boys.
In this old world tea room in the high street, new world politics are discussed over scones and jam and cream. Boris Johnson has said of UKIP, they're irrelevant, they're stealing our policies, just ignore them. Can you be ignored?
No. There's such a groundswell now from really from ground roots people. When I'm walking around, I get very, very little resistance to UKIP. There are people who might carry on.
There's a lady over there in the corner there who's not quite agreeing with that at the moment.
Absolutely not. I don't know what annoys me is the huge generalisations that you and also people in the press talk about. So the last budget that came out last week, something that wasn't widely reported on was that the Office of Budget Responsibility, part of their projections for economic growth was actually based on migration, because migration at the moment has a net positive impact on GDP, and that was part of their figures. And the huge oversimplification that people like UKIP have on immigration is enormously damaging. You have people from different countries and they all contribute in different ways. Some of them do have benefits and there are others that come over and contribute enormously. And what the problem is you tar them all with the same brush.
You've obviously sat there listening and realised that we're not trying to stop immigration in any sense at all. We welcome it. It's very useful for the country. What is not so useful is the fact the open borders policy allows people to come here and not contributing, but are actually taking. What David Cameron was on about was a totally different thing. He was on about the legitimate people who come to the country and contribute.
Because of the rhetoric you use, you talk about people coming over here and not contributing. But the fact is, most people do contribute, and often when people don't contribute, they end up going home if they can't get jobs.
Can I just ask you a quick question? Do
Yes.
you understand the feeling of concern? It's amongst many people in this country of a lack of control. Too many people just feeling a little overwhelmed in their own country.
Yeah, I do understand that. I do completely understand that. But what annoys me is that the whole issue's oversimplified and also sensationalised by the press and certain parties that jump on it. If we're going to discuss things, we need to discuss things based on facts and acknowledge the complexities of the situation.
I take it you won't be voting UKIP.
Not in a month of Sundays, no.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Out on the hustings, Boris Johnson says it's important to learn from the mistakes of the 1990s when he says immigration rates were far too high. He admits it's a key policy area to get right.
What you've got to do is you've got to make sure that you have policies that move away from Labour's uncontrolled immigration. They had a huge amount of illegal immigration in the 1990s and right up right up till 2010. they let the brakes off, and that did a lot of. I think people felt, that the thing was out of control.
All voting
Have we got a picture with Matt?
Yes.
Excellent. Good. We'd like to see that. Certainly you've got the dog vote.
But not everyone's bonkers for Boris.
Come on, guys.
Right.
I do think there's an element of the kind of bumbling, slightly gauche, over the top that's kind of pretty. It's an act, okay? I think that often people say that what you see with Boris Johnson is what you get. I think there is such a thing as fake authenticity, and I think he's kind of got that.
Alistair Campbell was an advisor to then Prime Minister Tony Blair and has a long-standing disdain for the golden-haired mayor.
He definitely thinks he can go all the way to Downing Street, and he's a man with a plan. I think it would be pretty bad for Britain if that happened. I think the idea that we, as a country, would elect somebody because they're funny, because they, make mistakes and sort of bluster their way through it, I think that could be quite dangerous, and I think it'd be very, very bad for Britain's reputation.
But despite some misgivings, Britain's conversation with this most ambitious of men may have just begun in earnest. The challenges of a nation may one day fall to him. Immigration, the economy, Britain's place in the world. Some see him as a joke. But he may well have the last laugh.
I like his enterprise, I like his intellect, I like his get up and go attitude, I like the way he doesn't, he's happy, he's prepared to knock down an icon, his spirit. And I think underneath some of the inevitable clowning that he does, he's a very, very clever, very astute man. That's what I like about him.
A future Prime Minister?
In time, but not yet.